Greetings, everyone. My name's Jem Noble. I am Director of Programs at Cineworks Independent Filmmaker Society. Cineworks pays respect to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, on whose unceded traditional territories our facilities and our work takes place. I'll give you a very brief outline of the structure of this evening's proceedings. First, I'd like to say what an honor it is, though, to introduce to you acclaimed Musqueam weaver Deborah Sparrow to provide us with cultural welcome. Deborah, welcome.
Well, thank you for that. Good evening, everyone. Welcome guests and honored filmmakers on your journey. Some of my friends from long ago I see here. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to, as he mentioned, our unceded territories of our people. But I always like to say, what does that really mean? Is it just words? Unceded territory, Vancouver, Canada. What does that mean to you? Maybe we should make a film about it. Because, they say it, but I don't see anything that actually has anything to do with it in the end. So I think to me it's just words, and I would like them to act on it somehow and sometime soon. It's hard to believe when you come into this place they call Vancouver that we even ever existed here. And it's coming to a time where we're wanting to step forward now, and we can come out of our element and come out of our little village in Musqueam and come here to the city and be asked to be representative here to welcome all kinds of different situations that are going on, gatherings and meetings, and I'm really in awe of what is going on in the world, because I'm probably really guilty of not really leaving Musqueam very often, except for go up to my neighborhood. So when I've been asked by my chief to come out on behalf of him, by the way, on behalf of my chief, Wayne Sparrow, who, yes, shares the same last name as me, but he's not my husband because I'm still looking. He is my little brother, and I've taught him everything he knows. That's why he's chief. But we joke about that. But, it's kind of sounds romantic to say we come from a long line of chiefs, and we actually do, because our grandfather, Shwenam, late Shwenam, went to Supreme Court for us to fight for our rights, and my father was a chief. I have two sisters who are former chiefs, and a brother who actually set a precedence up in Metlakatla, being the first Salish chief to be nominated up there and actually accomplishing that. It had never been happened before. So I think it's because we are deeply rooted in the passion and the love that we have for our history and our people, as are all of us who are rooted in our communities, as I know you are in Kingcome. And I know that because I lived there for a year. And I seen, and I was inspired by the amazing way in which that connection to your history never really stopped. And it continued, and it is alive in the hearts of everyone who comes in and out of that village, as well as Guildford, and then Alert Bay, and all the villages on that part of the coast. I was mesmerized by the world in which they live and still do. And it inspired me to say to myself, what are we doing at home? And yes, we have our winter ceremony, but what was the vision of our people before contact? Because when I looked at the regalia and the way in which the honor of these people, the Kwakwaka'wakw, have and continued I wondered about my people. And so when I returned home to my own roots, I started to dig very deeply into who we were and who we are. And my grandfather, who lived to be 100, said, know who you are and know where you come from. Because if you don't know that, then you're nothing. He said, do you know why all those non-native people move around and travel so much? I said, no. He said, because they don't know who they are. So I was like, oh. And he goes, when you know who you are and you know where you come from, you stand in that. You don't need to go looking around everywhere else and moving and never feeling like you belong. And I knew that because I felt that. I felt a sense of the deep rootedness through him. And so we started our venture to redefine and bring forward the way in which our textiles were the foundation of who we are. And we've been on a 30-year journey to bring that forward and I always said that I wouldn't stop until I wrapped the city of Vancouver in our patterns, and I'm wearing one. I don't have a blanket because I never make a blanket for sale. Everything I make is commissioned. Everything I make belongs in this world, and it comes from the inspiration of the people who originally made them. So I'm making them for our chiefs, for our naming ceremony, it always has a purpose to come into this world, to be danced, to be covered, to be ceremony. And I'm amazed at all of our Northwest Coast people. I'm in awe and I'm honored to be a part of this in which we are building a new way of how we're going to live here in this world, all of us. And so the stories that you will film, the stories you'll hear, the connections you'll make are going to be a new way in which our visions are going to come to be. Because there's another saying, without a vision, people perish. And so our visions were being redirected by colonialism and assimilation. And it's our responsibility, all of us, to redirect our vision back to where we know we need to go and how we need to balance that between the worlds we live in. Because that's key to everything that's going on. With what happened to this young man back east that has caused such a stir throughout our people in Canada. Someone on Facebook said today that she was scared to raise her children now in such a racist place, and that she felt like a bad mother because she can't protect them. So I replied to her and I said, please don't feel that way, because we have to remember and have hope that there are some good non-Indigenous people in the world, some that are in this room today, that we need to work together. And for every one bad person there are many, many more who are with us in our walk. And we need to remember that, and that we need to have faith that we can turn this and shift it. We're shifting people. We can do this, and we can do it together. And so that's the balance that we're looking for when we start our journeys and all the work that you're going to do in Kingcome, and have that opportunity to have a sense of what it could have been like when the longhouses were in full use, always. Just a little bit of vision that goes to see what was life like. Now that I know what I know from my people, and there's stories passed through our elders that said, back in the day, the Quaggas and the Haida came down and warred with us, and they probably did. And I thought to myself, just imagine what it'd be like to be captured and taken back, or vice versa, and to be walking into that world that was so different than yours. And I'm in awe of the people and the history on this coast. And I was sharing with Camilla earlier that what is reconciliation? How are we going to reconcile, or are we? And maybe that's another project that we can work together and work on to say, how do we reconcile, or do we? And really dig into the city of Vancouver and find out what the First Nations who live here feel about that. Because as a Musqueam, I'm working hard with the city now, and Camilla's one of my friends who I work with, to say, when I come to Vancouver, I see more of other people's work than of my own. But that's not anybody's fault but ours for not coming forward. So that's the job that we have to do in Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and in Squamish, to start embracing this land that is ours and that we stand on. And then look for the balance of welcoming and standing with other of our people that come to make this their home as well. That the city of Vancouver understands that this is an ancient land, well back into 9,000 years as our oldest village in Jericho. I had the opportunity of being with someone, a basket maker who's about 75 or 80 from Squamish in the States, the USA, and he brought a basket that he was working on, and he did it in 4 levels, and the bottom level was the oldest basket replica that he ever worked on, and it came right from Musqueam, and it was 4,500 year old stitch. But these baskets were made in every village all over the coast. And it's just, you know, it's continual education now of going forward, but then going backwards and accumulating that knowledge and bringing it forward. Because I'm going to tell you something, everybody that is working in the way that they are going to be the saving grace of this world. We're going to bring back the knowledge and the wisdom that our elders had and want us to reintroduce in a way that's going to work for all of us. And I believe that our youth and that our children, the little ones, lots of them are old souls coming back here with the wisdom, and they're going to share that with us as we move through this world, this ever so challenging world that we live in. Not only do I come from a long line of chiefs, but a long line of chiefs that like to talk a lot. So I better get going here because you have a nice evening ahead of you, and I just want to say thank you to the people who asked us to come forward to stand here on behalf of my friends from Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish, my relatives. We're not a divided people. We're all one. We're cousins and aunts and uncles, and we're relatives. So this beautiful land we live in today, we share with them. And so I want to hold my hands up to all of you and the good work you're going to do, and remember your vision and the work that you're going to do on behalf of, again, my chief, my council, but mostly on behalf of my ancestors and yours. Hajj Kasiyam. But as I leave you, I want to share with you just a little, I think I have it with me here somewhere. You know, it's interesting because I was talking to Wa back there, and I said, oh, it's so good to see you. And he said, yeah, I got asked to come and, you know, work with the youth. And I said, oh my God, does that mean you're turning into an elder? And so when do we define ourselves as elders? When does that happen? And who defines it? Do we go by the colonial ways? When you're 65, move over, go over there now, you're invisible? Do we retire? I know one thing as a weaver, I'll never retire till my fingers don't work again anymore. But they asked me to come forward, they said they want an elder, and I said, oh, well then I can't show up because I'm not an elder yet. Because my elders are 80 and 85 and 90 and 100, and I don't really have the right to call myself that until they allow me. So just because somebody turns 60 doesn't mean they're an elder now. They also want me to say a prayer, and I say, well, I can't really say a prayer either because a lot of people don't pray in the way in which we're used to, so I think we shouldn't do that. So what I've come to do and to know is that I'll bring with you some beautiful words that our late Chief Dan George wrote, and he was a visionary, and he was a poet, and he was a writer, and he seen where we were going to go. So I found this beautiful poem that he wrote, and now that he shares with us. So I'll leave you with these words. May the stars carry your sadness away. May the flowers fill your heart with beauty. May hope forever wipe away your tears. But above all, may silence make you strong. So Hajka to you, all of you, and enjoy your evening. Thank you very much. Hajka.
Thank you, Deborah. I'd like to begin with some thanks to the SFU Institute for Humanities for sponsoring this launch event, and for SFU Galleries for their generous support in helping this event this evening happen. I'd also like to say a bit more about myself, and that's not particularly because I like to, but I feel kind of awkward, like it's awkward and suspicious to be a non-Indigenous presenter in a territory in which it's custom to position yourself as a speaker. So I am an artist, a parent, a queer person. I am from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I have Welsh, English and Scottish heritage, about which I don't know very much at all, and that's partly because of the cultural conditions where I come from. Like every non-Indigenous person, I have a distant Indigenous heritage, and in the UK, that's often spoken about using the word Celts, although the term Celt, or Keltoi as it would have been in Roman, is a colonial construct. It really is a very vague term that kind of means indigenous to Northwest Europe, so it's not really an identity marker, it's a very vague geographic marker. I'm a permanent resident of Canada now, and I have an application in process to become a citizen, and it's only really since moving here and working as a cultural facilitator that I've become more aware of the ongoing nature and stakes of colonialism, the nation state that I come from being one of a small number of places in Europe responsible for mass colonization tied in with commercialization, and the crimes against humanity that kind of project has represented and that continue in the society that we co-produce together here in Canada. The history books that I learnt from whilst growing up in the UK didn't present a particularly accurate picture of the nature of colonialism. It was presented as a historic phenomenon, and that's true in as much as, you know, there is history, but it's not true in as much as it is ongoing. And again, colonization and colonialism is something that everyone in Canadian society lives with, reproduces, resists, and enacts. And so that's become a sense of, it's playing an important role in my sense of responsibility as somebody who wants to become a Canadian citizen. It's a real privilege to be involved in this project, Mirrored in Stone. It comes from, it's been enabled by Canada Council for the Arts, and particularly a grant stream called New Chapter. And the idea behind New Chapter, it was a large pool of money that was made available after the current government reinstated money that was cut by the previous government to the arts. And the agenda behind New Chapter was to mark, and I think that's an important word to recognise, to mark 150 years of settler government confederation. I don't think those are the terms that Canada Council use, but as a programmer at Cineworks, which is an artist-run centre, I was aware of this large pool of money that was being made available for projects marking 150 years. And so I kind of had my feelers out, was interested in whether there were local filmmakers and media artists with ideas for projects that we might be able to help support. And through Amjo Hal of SFU Centre for Community Engagement, I heard about a kind of outline project that Althea Thauberger and Marianne Nicolson had been discussing, and met with, I think it was Althea I met with first, and eventually met with both Althea and Marianne to talk about this project. And that's what wound up being the focus of this application. And you'll hear more about that. I won't give any more detail about that because Marianne will give an introduction. Althea will give a brief introduction, then Marianne will give an extended introduction. We'll be watching a film by Lindsay Willey. And then we'll be inviting the artists involved in the project, professional artists and guest artists, up here to self-introduce and then to discuss their experiences over this weekend. To give you an outline, though, mirrored in stone is, at this point, it's a very loose framework. And the looseness of that framework is partly expressed in what some of you will have seen of changing of chairs and discussing things in advance of this presentation. I've just come from Alert Bay, along with a cohort of collaborators, the professional artists and participant artists, youth artists involved in this project. We were invited up to attend the potlatch of Byron Alfred, which was an incredible honour. It involved a ceremony in which some of us were involved with helping with document. So helping document, that began at 9 a.m. and the last of our cohort left at 2:30 a.m. the next morning, either side of which we've had travel from here to Alert Bay, travel back. Lots of us running on very little sleep. So just to kind of contextualize what may come across as a particular kind of vibe, maybe like including the speed at which I'm talking. I can be a bit peppier than this ordinarily, but it's been a really incredible, humbling and moving experience. I'm just getting to know some very interesting people, very interesting artists. I'm really pleased, I'm really proud to be involved in this project as a facilitator. I'd just like to mention all of the artists involved. So we have our lead artists whose initial discussions began this project, Marianne Nicolson of the Musqueam Dzawada'enuxw people and the Dzawada'enuxw First Nation. Althea Thauberger, I won't give everyone's personal details, I'm just going to list names now. So Althea Thauberger, our guest professional artists who were invited by Marianne and Althea in consultation with the Dzawada'enuxw First Nation Band Council, Cheryl Lirondell, Diane Roberts, Siku Alulu, William Wasden, Wendy Redstar, Kamala Todd, and Scott Benison Abandon. An open call was put out among the Dzawada'enuxw community for expressions of interest for participants in this project, for youth artist participants. And following that call, the artists who join us collaborating in this project are Lindsay Willey, Katrina Hopkins, Nabadoo Taylor, Daryl Dawson, and Juliana Speer. Excuse me. Everyone will come up and tell you more about themselves and their relationship to this project. But first of all, I'd like to invite Althea Thauberger up to say a few words before we then hear from Marianne Nicolson, watch Lindsay's video, and then invite everyone up to speak. Althea.
Hello, everybody. Oh, thanks. So I kind of do, yeah. It is such an honor to be here. it's been such a profound experience spending time and sharing with all of you artists the last days. I want to say a little bit about how this project came to be and a little bit about the kind of loose structure of it to contextualize the presentation this evening. It was, I think it was something like 5 years ago when Marianne Nicolson gave a talk in this room, speaking about her art practice and her community, and some of the her understanding and her relationship to the ancient histories of her people, as well as the more recent colonial realities that have been imposed on her people. And after that talk, there was some drinks in a bar, and we were sitting across from each other, and she asked me if I was interested in working with her in some way. And I was, actually, I didn't know if I heard you right the first time. I couldn't believe it. I was so honored and surprised. And that sort of began a conversation that's been going on for a few years and has culminated in this project going forward. Marianne and I will be working on a film that is kind of providing a kind of structure for a number of, I shouldn't say providing for, it will be sort of documenting a number of artist projects that will be going forward. We're describing it as a learning film, and that's a term that is borrowed from two sources. One of them is a Russian collective Studelet, who work in St. Petersburg, and another is Bertolt Brecht, the German playwright, who has used the term in relation to process-oriented plays. And my role in the film will be as a producer, and Marianne will be directing the film as well as leading the larger project. And the work that I do is often in collaborative filmmaking, often in kind of experimental documentary filmmaking. And I've worked in a number of communities all over the world and more locally. And the way that I see my role going forward will be as a facilitator and a producer, and someone who can lend some of the skills that I've developed over the course of the work that I've done in other contexts to bringing together a way to sorry, I'm a little out of it. I'll try to get it together. Bringing together a way for connections between stories that I think will be told through this project, and those stories are will be coming through such an extraordinary kind of nexus of backgrounds of the artists who are coming together for this project, as well as I believe Dzawada'enuxw nation members who will be speaking with. And the artists who we're working with will be invited to come to Kingcome Inlet, which is Marianne's ancestral village, and to interact with each other and with the local artists who we'll be working with to produce new works. And together, all of our production will finally be exhibited at the Belkin Gallery at UBC in 2019. So that will be an opportunity for all of you to see those projects, to see the film that Marianne and I are producing, and for us to have to find a public expression for those things outside of its local context. Again, I just want to thank first of all, I want to thank Marianne for inviting me to work with you and to trust me to enter your community. I want to thank all of the artists who've come in. I have to say, over the last days, not just over the last days, over the years that I've been following your work, and especially over the last days of conversations with you, it has been such a kind of amazing journey of, it's been very emotional, it's been very profound, it's been very fun and hilarious and emotional. And I want to extend my profound thanks and respect to all of you. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Elakesla, nuko Tayagila'ogwa. One of my Kwakwala names is Tayagila'ogwa, which means like invisible maker woman. I'm really honored to be a part of this process, and I think part of the emotion that you can kind of feel coming through as we're coming up to speak is that even in the last few days we've really experienced a tremendous amount together, and it's really interesting to kind of be a part of a project with so many people. I wanted to show this image of Kingcome because really all of it for me comes from this place, and very early on I realized that there was such strength in our togetherness as a people, as Dzawada'enuxw, as Muskmak Dzawada'enuxw, and as Kwakwaka'wakw people. And one of the things that I felt very cautious about as I was growing up, that I learned to be cautious about, was how much I shared with the outside world of our community, because I knew that our community was under duress from the outside world, and that the outside world wanted kind of the lands and the waters that we traditionally had under our jurisdiction in ways that we did not understand and that did not fit with the longevity that we held in our hearts for that relationship. So I always had real caution. So I in my art practice I would share so much, but I was very reluctant to open that up to the outside world. But I started to feel, in these conversations with Althea, that maybe it was time to allow that to happen and to open it up a bit so that I could, consider what could happen if I invited people to my home community. And so we thought of ways where we could bring our, I guess for me it's bringing two aspects of my life together. The people that I've met through my travels as a professional artist and my home, my community, the people that I know at home, which in the past I've kept quite separate. When we started the project, we decided that we would start it by inviting the group to come to a potlatch in Alert Bay. And a relative of ours, Byron Alfred, was hosting a very important potlatch for us. And so the group was invited to come and bear witness to that and to ground themselves in the worldview that we carry as Kwakwaka'wakw people. And then from there we can have discussions and sharing. Because much of what we're really talking about is the storytelling of human experience and how we experience our place in the world, and how we reflect to one another what that experience is. And so I thought for myself even it was incredibly important to open that up, to be vulnerable in that way, so that I could see who we were as Kwakwaka'wakw people within the eyes of other people who came to bear witness to what we do. So those were some of the thoughts that I had in regards to this project. Much of that caution has come from like a political struggle. How do we identify within the confines of a nation, the nation state of Canada, that in so many ways has refused to recognize us. And yet we have held on to that, our ideas of who we are and how we relate to one another and the world around us, tenaciously. And one of the things that I had to come to terms with was that our people always taught generosity and reciprocity, and in our ceremonies, they are only valid if people witness them. You know, you can't just claim something. You have to stand up, and other people have to recognize what it is that you're saying. Otherwise, without that reciprocal relationship, it's not legally valid. And so in a way, I thought what we needed to do was to open up through this project to other peoples and to forge those relationships and to bear witness to one another. Certainly today in Canada, we are facing extraordinary challenges. The 150 is a very interesting, I guess, jumping off point, because for us, the 150, you know, we kind of giggle around about it. You know, what is 150 compared to, 13,000 years? And that is a reality for us. And I saw this poster last year in Toronto because they were celebrating the 150 there. And it really kind of said everything, because it was, at the beginning it says Canada, the country of opportunities, and it says free land for all. But I knew from the opposite direction, the other perspective of having looked at that basically that free land that they were talking about were our lands. And so while they were giving hundreds of acres of free land to settler peoples to come and colonize this nation, we were being stripped of our rights and on our lands and being pushed onto tiny little reserves. So this is the village that I showed in the first slide, and you can see Gwai, which is our village, the houses up there, and you can see how small the reserve is because we're just in that little tiny patch. And then the rest of the lands below us are the allocations that were being given out to the settlers. One of the things that our old people did, however, was on those lands along the flats, they put this pole up. And it's interesting because the settlers thought that the pole was there to welcome them, and they spoke of it in that way. But we know that our people put that up as a form of assertion, that these were our lands, and so that people would know that. And it relates to in the same time frame, there was this painting that was painted at the mouth of the river, not very far from where that pole was. And it relates to the title of the project, Mirrored in Stone, because at the time that these lands were being taken away from us, and at the time our potlatch was banned, our great uncles who had put that pole up also created this pictograph at the mouth of the river. And what they did was, in 1921, the Indian agent William Halliday had incarcerated a number of our people. And what the Scow brothers did was they potlatched in Kingcome, where it was very isolated and it was very hard for the Indian agent to get up there. And they purchased these cows from the Indian agent's brother, who owned one of those farms below the village. And they feasted with those cows and they potlatched. And then they painted it. They documented that at the mouth of the river with this painting, with these coppers and these cows. And they even wrote the date in 1921. So it was such an act of resistance and resilience on their part to do that. And when I think about that kind of mirroring or documentation of our experience and how we were experiencing things onto the land, it's remarkable to me because that pictograph still exists today. It's very clear still. And so we travel, every time we leave Kingcome and we go back into Kingcome, we go by that pictograph. So it's almost 100 years old, and yet it's still serving its purpose to remind us of who we are and what our perspectives are on the world. And it was the influence for this painting, the really large pictograph at the mouth of the river. And this one is like 38 feet high by 28 feet wide, and I made it as big as I possibly could because we really needed to declare that we were there still in the valley, because at the time they were pretty much ignoring our existence. And I remember there was an episode where the forestry company was going to spray insecticide over the village, and we were opposed to it. But I remember seeing the planes going over, like not very, we'd had these discussions, and then I seen the planes going over, and I was asking, well, why is that happening? I thought maybe, that there would be a process in place where, it could be discussed. And they just said, oh, well, it's just happening. It's just happening. And I thought, how can it just happen without consultation or, without our input in it when we live here and we don't know what the effects of this is? And it just seemed to be that was the way it was. And I thought, well, that has to be challenged because, we're not invisible and we exist and we have a worldview. And so I thought, well, I can reflect that in this really large painting and paint that on the rock at the mouth of the river. And people cannot fail to see this declaration that the Dzawada'enuxw people live here. So that's how that painting came into being, and it was an assertion of that position. And this idea that we ourselves are mirrored in the land. The land reflects back to us who we are. And so these rock paintings do that for us. So I guess that gives an overall kind of idea as to what we're trying to do. I think it's interesting, to kind of subversively utilize the 150 money to create something that we will find useful for us as people. And it was really, really important for me to help develop the project as something that would be useful for us as Kwakwaka'wakw. And to me, it's a step forward to open that community up and say, come and be a part of us, come and bear witness to what we do, and we will also then share in turn with you. So it is a very, I guess, a gesture of stepping forward and trying not to be, I guess, afraid to do that. I'm very pleased and honored with our group, and especially the youth participants that we have, and that I believe that what they will learn from the professional artists will be very profound and fundamental to their own way of developing their voice. And I think that's the key for me, is because I've had the privilege of having a voice in the public through my art practice, but I think it's also important for our other members of our community to have a voice, and this is an opportunity through the arts to have a voice around what's happening within our lands and territories. So about a year ago, we started a protest against the fish farms that are in our territory because, of course, we have the largest amount of fish farms in any area within the Broughton Archipelago, and it's completely creating havoc within our natural environment. So our young people are really engaged in this fight against the fish farms, and it's something that's taking up a lot of our time and energy. And I thought that a project like this could help them, to have a voice around what they're experiencing in the fish farm resistance, and to help learn how it is that we came to be in this place, and to work towards strategies for moving ahead. And so those are my hopes around what's happening. And thank you for coming out tonight to kind of bear witness to us and what we are doing in turn. Ela Kesla.
On Thursday last week, the participants in this project travelled from far and wide to get to Alert Bay, from places including Montreal, Portland, Toronto, Kingcome Inlet, Victoria, and Vancouver. On Thursday night, we had a meeting, the first time that all of the participants in the project had met one another together. It was a meal in a community building in Alert Bay, to which many of Marianne's relatives were also invited. That was an introduction for the community to the project. So I mentioned that the day after that and into the night was the potlatch. Yesterday was a full day of travelling back, and today was a colloquium event, a space for speaking at UBC, facilitated by the Morris and Helen Belkin Art Gallery, who are a key partner in this project. As Althea mentioned, they will be collaborating in the production of a full exhibition for this project from January to April in 2019. So thank you very much to Lorna Brown and to UBC. Morris and Helen Belkin Art Gallery. So I'm saying this to give you an idea of how, again, to kind of get back to the kind of emergent and loose nature of the structure of this project. So this is all part of the participants meeting and getting to know one another, getting to know from the kind of experiences they've had so far, members of the community at Kingcome, Inlet and Alert Bay and associated territories. We're now, I should just say a bit more about that structure. So the guest professional artists who've been invited, as both Althea and Marianne have mentioned, will be invited to stay at Kingcome on what we've been talking about as engagement residencies. So for those periods, which we think at this point will be a number of sessions where probably 2 artists at a time. This is kind of still being worked out, but we'll go and stay in the community probably for 4 or 5 days, and then co-produce ongoing conversation as a result of those experiences, and produce their own kinds of response in their own chosen artistic milieu to contribute to the project, and to contribute to the overarching structure of the learning film that Althea mentioned. And in addition to the exhibition at the Belkin Gallery, the learning film will be distributed worldwide. So we will be arranging, the plan at this point is to arrange 10 grassroots community screenings around the world in Indigenous and allied communities. And to release it on, whether it's YouTube or Vimeo, for free, and promote that as a way of communicating the kinds of exchanges and the issues that the project explores and the film explores. So with that bit of context, I'd now like to invite all of our guest artists, participating artists from Kingcome, our guest professional artists, Marianne and Althea. Oh no, I'm missing something. Getting ahead of myself there. We're going to say film first, and the film is by Lindsay Willey. And yes, Lindsay, if you'd like to come and introduce the film, I'll just get rid of. I'll get this. So we're now looking for. Is it on a different screen?
No, it's right here.
Okay, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm Marianne's cousin. I live in Kingcome, Inlet, and I've been involved with the fish farm action, and I was there when we first went out to deliver eviction notices to the farms in our territory, and I brought my camera, and my friend Tamo was there with me, and we were both filming the action that was going on. And we started last year in the summer of, or no, it was 2015. And we basically just filmed every time we went out and did either a ceremony or eviction notice, and we quickly put together a video to release to the public so that everyone knew what was going on and what our issues are. And this one is from when one of the first times we went out. I think it was the second time we went out. And so yeah, this is just kind of the beginning of it. Since this video, we've occupied 2 fish farms so the Musqueam, Dzawada'enuxw and the Numgees have occupied fish farms, and recently we got an injunction against us for being on the farms, but there still is an occupation going on an island nearby the fish farm. So I haven't been as involved this year, but I still am, but just not as much as last year. But this is from 2015.
So I'll let you guys, folks, know that, as you're probably already aware, that you're not authorized to enter this workplace.
Okay, we're not authorized to be on this.
On this particular work site, you're not authorized to be on this work site. Correct, sir.
Well, where did you get your authorization to be in this territory?
Sir, I'm employed by this company, and I'm authorized to work on this work site as an employee of Marine Harvest.
This area you're talking about belongs to the Musqueam Dzawada'enuxw people, and we've never ever given you the right to come and take over on our territory. You're here illegally. So I know you're just an employee. We have no beef with you, but we do with your corporation. We are going to walk this farm with or without your acceptance.
Well, I do not grant you authorization.
Well,
I understand that you have taken it upon yourself to come aboard. If I may ask you to just follow our biosecurity protocols and dip your feet in a Vercon solution to protect our farm and to protect all wild.
We've never had to worry about biosecurity stuff for our fish. It's only since
You following our protocols. You know what I mean? It's a two-way street here. So what gives you the right to come and impact our people, our way of life, and then ask us to dip our feet into some solution so that we protect what's destroying our salmon, what's destroying our way of life here, right? Where's the good faith? Now we're here because we have every right to be here. This is our territory and has been so for at least 13,000 years. Our roots go deep within these waters, deep within these territories. How deep does your roots go? Where's your consideration for us? We live here. We live in these waters. Where do you live?
No comment.
Where do you live? Where do you live? You guys come here and you work. You work and you're lining someone's pocket up. You're lining someone else's pocket up, a corporation. Meanwhile, you guys are affecting us that live here. When is it time to do something right? Instead of just taking hands, top down. Let's just start doing something right here for a change. So we're here under our authority. Our law has been here way before British law ever got here. So to ask us to try and protect your interest here in our territory, disrespectful. How do we make sure that our bottom lines don't affect others? Right?
What we're doing is not protesting. We are protecting. We're protecting the resources that the Creator has given to us on our land and our water, not for ourselves, for our future generations, for the future of the Musqueam Dzawada'enuxw, the Numgees, the Mowafaghian, and all the other tribes all across our world.
Our land and our waters is our way of life, our culture. All of my life, I've known this. And we go to our potlatches and we dance. and we dance our masks that represent all of creation. I'm just saying to the people that are buying these fish, you should know what you're buying. You got to be careful. You got to be careful that what you're eating. They're sick.
You see what they've done to our beaches and imagine what they're doing to our wild salmon. Our clam beaches are all starting to die off. We need to stop it now before we lose everything.
The fish farms have trespassed on the unceded territory of the Dzawada'enuxw. The rules of trespass are really similar all around the world. It's not a difficult thing to understand. We need our governments to stand up, realize their error, and rectify it.
The wild salmon connect all of us. They migrate through all of our territories, and we depend on it. So let's link arms. Let's come together. And I also ask British Columbians, I know a lot of you don't agree with fish farming. Link arms with us.
We have to get these farms out before our people start dying.
The Mamalolo hereditary chiefs never ever agreed to the fish farms. We're standing at the edge of the cliff right now today. This is the most important part of our history. If this doesn't go through, we're gonna have no more title and rights in anywhere in our territory.
I just need to attend to a bit of infrastructure. So before the event, speaking with the technical staff of part of the MEX department, thank you to them for helping this evening. We had said initially that we were going to, after introductions and some panel discussion, invite an informal Q&A at the back around the buffet, but we're actually going to have open up the Q&A first whilst everyone is up here after we've made introductions and had some initial discussions. So that will, just so the camera person knows, there will be Q&A, and so people with staff with microphones know that we'll need mics going out to the audience too. Yeah. Thanks. And on that note, now I'd like to invite our participating artists in the project up to take a seat. We'll grab some mics and distribute them, and then here's some personal introductions and discussion.
We'll have 3, so if you guys are just sharing, passing, share. Yeah.
If anyone would like a glass of water, this is informal, and we have some just up there. So feel free at any point to get up. Okay, so we've heard already from introductions from Althea and Marianne and Lindsay. So I think just counterclockwise going this way. In the Kwak-Kwak-Iwak style, I'd like to go counterclockwise. So I'll start with Kamala, please.
The music goes there and then. Tansei. Nia Kamala. I was born and raised here in the Vancouver area, but I'm not of this land. My mom's family is Métis Cree, and my dad is a first generation Canadian of German immigrants. I'm a filmmaker and community planner, background in kind of urban geography, very interested in the stories of where we live, what's visible and where we live, and what Marianne was talking about how important it is to see ourselves reflected, and how Vancouver as a colonial city It's a colonial landscape that hides the fact that this is indigenous land, that it's the land of the Hunkaminam-speaking, Squamish-speaking people who have lived here forever, and as Deborah talked about earlier, have been in many ways made invisible. So as a grateful guest, uninvited guest, visitor, I feel a deep sense of gratitude to the local indigenous nations and a deep sense of responsibility, and the way that I try to work in my teachings of reciprocity and interconnectedness and showing respect and humility is through supporting the local nations to be heard. And I do that as a community planner, working with City of Vancouver, and I do that through video. And I dream of the day, as Deborah talks about, when the local blankets and stories and language and history, everything, the governance, the indigenous laws of this place are once again firmly, visibly, undeniably, clearly here and visible to all of us, because right now we're living in violation of the indigenous laws of this land, and it's time. The party's over, the land grab is over, the endless extraction and sense of entitlement is over, and it's time to restore and respect and make space and listen and remember. Hi, hi.
Buju benesidij nakas mangan dodem obishkokang donji munyang obi. My name is Scott. I'm I just wanted to say, I'm not going to get into my artistic practice at all, but I'm just incredibly honored to be part of this project and to be invited into this territory, into this community, to work with the participating artists and that community. Greatly looking forward to it, and thanks for the hard work so far, and incredibly difficult to plan a project of this scope. So I'm just that next year is going to be an amazing year, and so far it's been full of great laughs, and it's going to be amazing. So that's all I really wanted to say. So, miigwech.
Hello, my name is Siku Alalu. I'm Inuit from Pond Inlet, Nunavut, and Taino and Haitian from Haiti, and I also belong to the Tebeti Denesuthlane of Denende. I write and I work with stories, ancestral memory, inherited memory, creation stories, and political history. I do a lot of work with lineages and landscapes. I also work closely with elders and youth in different kinds of capacities. My favorite is to work with people on the land and to help restore connections and relationships. I'm also incredibly, deeply honored to be part of this project, and very touched to have been asked to be part of this project as an outsider. I'm also extremely protective of my heritage and my communities and our knowledge, and I feel that the coming back into ourselves and our own reclamation is something that is very, it's very sacred, it's very precious, and it is quite an honor. I don't know if that really gets the heart of it, but it is an honor to be asked to be part of this process, to help foster and build creativity and help the existing creativity and leadership and resilience to grow in this community, and to be brought together with so many other talented people from this community of Kingcome Inlet and abroad. It's quite amazing, and thank you very much to my dear friend, to Marianne, for your generosity in bringing us into this space and to Althea and to Jem and everybody else who's helped to bring this together. Klaihanami?
Gilakasa Nukwa Amwol Kineka. My name is Katrina Hopkins, and I'm from Kingcome Inlet. I am one of the youth participants, and I'm just incredibly honored to be here and very, very grateful to Marianne for allowing me to be a part of this project. Marianne's been an incredible role model my entire life, and so I just feel like, yeah, just have an open mind and an open heart, and I just am excited to work with everybody here.
Hello, I'm Daryl Dawson. I'm one of the participating artists from Kingcome. I live in Kingcome right now. I grew up there as a kid. I had to move away to go to high school in grade 8. We don't have a high school up there, so I moved to Victoria. And that's where I first started. I'm a native artist / carver. So they offered a First Nations art class in Victoria. The high school I went to. So that's where I started developing my own style. I'm currently a cultural coordinator in Kingcome. I also taught the cultural class in the school. I'm active in our potlatch system. I dance, I sing. I do the research of knowing what the dances are about, the ceremonies, what they mean, and relaying that onto our next generation. Just this past potlatch that was mentioned, I sat at we call it a log. It's we bang on it, and that's where we sing. So I took part in that. I also danced. I had an opportunity to dance more, but I'm not as good as a shape as I was before. Yeah, I'm excited just from our introduction earlier. So all these ideas are floating around, and so it's going to be exciting time. I'm grateful to Marianne. She came to Kingcome to present this project, and so it caught my interest right away. Get me out of the village for a little while. No, as soon as I heard about it, I wanted to be a part of it, and because just seeing the movie we have, my cousin Lindsay just showed, it brings it home to what everyday life is for us. That, I mean, you did see the lots that were given to settlers, and they're right at the mouth of our river. And so our everyday, I don't know how to say it, our struggle that we belong to the land. Our stories, our legends, they come from the land, and we have stories where thunderbirds came down to be the first ancestor of a family, of a tribe. We have stories that our ancestors came from the sea. We have stories that they came up from the land, from the sky, from the supernatural world. So it's, yeah, we belong to the land. We don't own the land, we belong to it. That's where our names come from. Our songs that we sing in the potlatches, they talk about the stories that, for instance, I danced to a song where it talks about the Thunderbird that came down to be the first ancestor. It talks about that action that took place. And there's hand movements that go with it. And we reenact those stories in our potlatches of telling the story of Tayagila'ogwa. That was the name of the Thunderbird. So that's the deep connection that my cousin Mike Willie was talking about. We have, our roots run deep within the lands, in our territory, in the Dzawada'enuxw territory. And it's a vast, vast territory that, it's not like for instance, we need to take a plane to get in there, or a boat. We can't just drive there in a car. So we're right in the middle of nowhere, which is yeah, we're still here.
Thanks, Daryl. Thank you. Me.
Gaelic cast off.
Nabidoo.
Hello, my name is Nabidoo. I come from Kingcome, Inlet, and Alert Bay. I grew up in Kingcome. I like to take photos of the land and the mountains and the river. I did occupy on the fish farm for a few months. So I just want to thank Marianne and the group of professional artists for letting me be a part of this. I was pretty excited and nervous, so I'm going to hand over the mic.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Juliana Spire. I'm from Kingcome. I like to do a bit of painting and photography. I'm also extremely honored and grateful for the opportunity that Auntie Marianne has provided. We're all related. Yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Cheryl Rondell and say Gasson. I won't do the long introduction. I wanted to just sing one little thing that came like a prophecy, and I'll sing it and then I'll explain it because I think that's all I want to say. Ekospig nawo etos kaya ganak ekana chita chekigawino aski. We are man how kiski kimo kuchitok pimatu enote mama wesitos gatotan netakamimon negotietan egaya pakachian eyo eyo. So what those words say is it's a prophecy that comes from ceremony where I'm from. I'm Métis Cree from northern Alberta and adopted into northern Saskatchewan as well, Treaty 6. And that prophecy says that in this time when the four workers are cleansing the land. And the four workers are the fires that are happening, and the floods that are happening, and the earthquakes that are happening, and the winds and the tornadoes and those storms that are happening. They're cleansing the earth. It'll be very difficult. It'll be really, really difficult. But if we help each other, and if we work together for life, our worldview is Miopamatsuan, good life, living a good life. If we work together, and if we don't give up, and we continue to remind each other that that's what we need to do, is to work together regardless of how tough it gets, then that's living a good life. And so I'm just really humbled to be with these formidable people from this place. Speechless.
Good evening. My name is Diane Roberts, and speechless is right. About 10 years ago, I came to Vancouver to run a theater company called Urban Ink Productions to take over from the founder, Marie Clements. And what I said this afternoon is how I feel now is that I never know why I'm here until I'm here, really. And it feels like it's full circle. I moved back to Toronto and Montreal a few years ago. During my journey at Urban Ink, one of the things that I was really important to me was carrying on Marie's legacy, which was to connect Indigenous artists with artists of color, with intercultural artists, and to create bridges and conversations for that could take place. And my question that I kept coming up with when I was running the company is, what does it mean for me to be on Indigenous land and to bring my own indigeneity? And so this conversation with my own indigeneity started to come up to the fore. And through that, I created a process alongside some collaborators, including Valerie Singh Turner, who's in the audience here, and called the Arrivals Legacy Process, which looks at and draws on ancestry as a jump-off point for artistic creation, for healing, for development of artistic voice. And that's the process that my intention is to bring that process here. And I'm thinking about, just building on what Cheryl just said, I'm thinking about this quote from Bell Hooks that without community, there's no liberation. And how do we draw on each other? How do we draw on our ancestral stories that live in our bodies, that travel through our blood, that are in our bones? How do we draw on those ceremonies that exist within our bodies? How do we take those ceremonies out into our contemporary world? And even watching your film, Lindsay, just seeing the ceremony and the spirit of walking those fish farm docks, I don't know what you call them, but it's just so inspiring. So that's that's why I feel so grateful to be invited to be part of this project. It's just, one other thing I want to say is, that I wrote down, is this idea of embodying stories. So how do we embody the stories we create or are given? And how do we create and source the stories that we embody? So how do we embody the stories we create or are given? And how do we create and source the stories we embody? So, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Wendy Redstar. I'm currently based in Portland, Oregon, but I grew up in Montana. I'm part of the Crow Nation And yeah, just a few months ago, Marianne came to Montana, curated a show for the Missoula Art Museum, and she was one of the artists. And we got to drive to the Flathead Indian Reservation. And I remember Marianne talking about like wanting, very curious to see the reservation in Montana, and also saying to me that she'd really like me to come and see her territory. And of course, I've seen photos and have followed her work, and I was thinking, wow, I really hope she asked me to come because I really want to see her territory. So just to echo everybody's sentiment, I'm very honored to be here. And I knew I was really lucky to be able to witness the potlatch. And in a way, it's like really made me want to bring my daughter so she could see it, or just other tribal members of mine to witness it. And also in turn for people to come to my reservation as well. And so I found myself kind of getting a little Crow-centric, and sitting with Scott, and we were trying to interpret what we thought was going on, and then Marianne would come and sit by us, and she'd tell us, and we're like, wow, we're totally off. that is not what was happening. And at one point, I won't say the whole thing because we might upset some Crees in here, but but yeah, there was a part of the ceremony where there were these different people coming in with hemlock. And one was coming in, and he was trying to get in the fire, and people were blocking him. And Scott was like, that looks like a crow who's trying to tell people how to run a ceremony. And then he walked out, and then another one came in, and it looked really confused. And I like to give Navajos a lot of crap, so I was like, that looks like a confused Navajo. Walked out, and then another one came in. But anyways, so we were telling Marianne that, and she's like, that's kind of what I wanted to know, because I'm so deeply entrenched in my community and my perspective on it, that to open it up and to have other people come and see it and hear from them as well gives me a new perspective. So it's been really amazing, and I really look forward to working with the community at another point. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Lindsay's made an introduction. I'd like to sort of bounce a few questions around to begin with, and then to kind of open up for questions from the audience. This first one is for anyone from Kingcome who wants to take this question. So obviously a lot of what we've seen in Marianne's presentation and heard about and seen in Lindsay's film relates to the way that salmon, wild salmon, are being pressurized and transformed by commercial practices. So the project in part, or very heavily, is about the impact of globalizing practices on traditional culture. And I'd definitely like to hear a bit more about the role of salmon in Kwakwaka'wakw culture, and specifically about what fish farms, if you can kind of give us some more detail about the impact of farmed fish in the environment. Anyone want to take that question?
That was a two-part. Just for me personally, salmon are very sacred. In my mind, they were there before us. They were the reason that we were able to create our culture, because we were fed so well that we didn't have to worry about running around for food or whatever. We had time to create our songs and dances, and it's really complex, our culture, and for me it's a keystone to it. Nowadays it's delicious. It brings us together as a community, which can be an issue because we have been separated by the government. And but when we go fishing, when we get fish, we all get together and can them and prepare them, I guess. So it brings us together. We have a dance, that's the salmon dance, and there's a song with it, and we honor them. I don't know if I'm missing, but they're very important to us. And the fish farms are impacting them. From what I've learned is that they carry a disease from Norway called the Piscine virus. There's other diseases that have come. And because they're in open nets, the wild salmon will swim by them and catch the diseases. And they also catch sea lice. There's lots of photos of tiny little baby salmon with big sea lice on them, like 10 of them on one little baby. And their waste or whatever comes from the farms gets onto the ocean floors and kills everything underneath. They're affecting our clam beds. Someone said they recently opened a clam and it was black inside. So it's just spreading and spreading and getting within our waters. And am I missing anything about that? Yeah, they impact the wild salmon. We've personally seen a decline in our rivers. So I think one of the stats that I kind of remember is 40% were lost in 2014 or 15. So we really haven't seen salmon in our rivers. We haven't had salmon to prepare and can for a couple years now. Like we haven't even had that. Yeah, so we're personally seeing the effects of that, and then the companies are just not. They haven't consulted with us ever, and we've told them no for 32 years now, and yeah, they're just breaking laws in our territory.
Thank you. Marianne, I wonder if you can take this one. And it's expanding on the same theme. So as well as the pressures that the salmon farms, the unauthorized salmon farms bring to the territory and the way of life, can you tell us a bit more about the environmental and social and cultural challenges that the nation faces?
Yeah, it's difficult because I think we were always fishermen. Like our people were always fishermen. For thousands of years we were fishermen. And we lived off the salmon, but we also lived with the salmon. And we learned how to harvest them in ways that would ensure their return year after year after year. And then even when the commercial fishing fleets came in, you know, we adapted to that and we became commercial fishermen. And we had, you know, some degree of success with that. But the fish farming is so detrimental to the wild salmon, and the commercial fishing of wild salmon has completely collapsed on the coast. And you can't say that the fish farms don't have something to do with that. And so it's really devastating to our traditional way of life, but it's devastating to our psychology as well as fisher people. And it's very difficult one of the things that's really difficult for us is that we live in the land, so we really feel the impacts. And it's hard when you live in the city to comprehend that the land has a sickness in it, you know, but we feel it. And it's not just that it's affecting the wild salmon, but it's affecting all the species that rely on the salmon, so the bears, the eagles. And it's so hard for us to understand why the provincial government and the federal government would allow this to continue to happen when it will threaten all these other industries that are part of the economy as well, like tourism. So how are we going to market British Columbia, in quotation marks, when so many of the species that rely on wild salmon to thrive, start to disappear? It doesn't make any sense to us, and that's what we're really fighting, is that mentality, because we're like, okay, we're on the ground, none of this makes sense. We actually have the science to prove that this is a serious problem for everybody, but we cannot seem to stop it. There doesn't seem to be political will at the higher levels of governance in this country to address what's happening in the environment. And that has a massive effect on us on the ground, but it affects everybody in the long run. Because in the long run, we no longer have sustainable food sources to feed ourselves. And who is benefiting, who is really benefiting from the fish farm industry is a question that we feel is important to ask. And so the impacts of what we're experiencing in the land are there's a ripple effect. We are very heavily impacted, yes, but we're almost like on the forefront of that. The impacts are greater and they roll outwards, and we're all impacted by the system that keeps these things in place. So I don't know, did I answer your question?
Curious as well about the flooding and the relationship to the logging and the ban.
Yeah, and I guess that extends to a broader issue, which is kind of entrenched within capitalism and a way of relating to the land as a source of kind of, I guess, capitalist style wealth and the belief in extracting all of that from the land in order to be wealthy in the short term. So our valley was being logged out for 100 years, and it completely changed the river system, and we saw that happening. As well, our village was flooded massively in 2010, where the whole village had to be evacuated by helicopter. And so, we're really feeling the impacts of climate change, and that climate change is being brought on by, it's a mentality. That's what the issue is that it's a mentality, and unless there's the will and the push from below, I guess, to make these political systems shift their way of thinking, then really kind of we're at the forefront of this catastrophe, these catastrophes that are coming, and we're really experiencing it, and we're fighting against it, but it's going to impact everybody, not just us. So we really trying to hold strongly onto our relationship to the land, and I guess that was part of the impetus of me wanting to open up more, because while I had been so protective of that, I also have come to a point where I think we have to share it as well. Because if other people could understand that relationship the way we understand it, and I was protective of it because I was scared people were going to take it away or continue to dismiss it. And now I realize that actually the world really needs the knowledge that we have so that we can change our society, so that we can survive in the world by changing the way that we have that relationship to land.
Thanks. My next question before is going to be a question to a number of the professional artists on the panel before we then open up. One of the important aspects of the structure of the project in organizing residency visits for guest artists at Kingcome is to facilitate an exchange between Kwakwaka'wakw traditional knowledges and contemporary artistic strategies as a way of investigating and communicating the challenges and issues at stake for the Tzawada'enuxw First Nation. And so I've got a couple of questions about artistic strategy here. So I'm going to start with a question for Scott. Scott, I was really interested in to learn about your practice and your work with virtual reality. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about what it means to you, the connection between worldview and the medium that you choose to work in.
Okay. Well, VR is just like a new medium that I'm exploring right now, so it's not necessarily the only medium, but I think it's more about VR as a medium in particular, especially related to this project. I'm not even, at this point, I'm not even considering what medium for this project yet, but there is a democracy with certain platforms in VR that that allows a dissemination of stories and of voices that can be easily shared with other communities across Canada and Turtle Island and the world at large. So I think for this project in particular, I think there's a lot of potential for these stories and this artwork to be sort of VR as a format, possibly as a very good way for that work to occur. So.
Thanks. I'm going to throw that question down at the other end and ask Cheryl. I'd just like to ask you about your relationship to song and rhythm. It's something that it's a long-standing practice for you.
And so the question is?
The question is, can you tell us about this as an artist who works in different communities through song and through rhythm, can you tell us about how you think of the role of strategy in that, technique or strategy?
You know, the challenge with this project is that, you know, some people, a couple of you know that over the years I've worked, since 2008 I've been working in prisons and working with incarcerated women and men and detained youth in youth detention centers. And I mean, I started going because those are my relatives, you know, those are our relatives. They don't get visited very often. They're being squashed. And really, they're just a bunch of extremely extraordinary beings who are being imprisoned because the government doesn't want to hear their voices, doesn't want to know their power. And so I get to have the opportunity of working in, you know, co-writing songs as a way to kind of, you know, it's subversion, you know. It's like, why are they letting me in? You know, I espouse anarchist values and, but you know, but the challenge with this project is that if you go to Kingcome Inlet or if you go to any of the Kwakwaka'wakw communities, they're so strong. They've got their shit together, you know. So I'm a little bit feeling a little bit like, wow, what can I contribute? But one thing that I am interested in is I'm in a process now in my life as I'm getting older where I'm moving over, you know, moving aside. Because we know that in the arts there's a glass ceiling, and especially in the indigenous arts, there's definitely a glass ceiling and a small pond, and definitely wanting to move aside for the next generation. So I think if any way, that's how I can contribute. And also, I'm really interested in the work that I've done to date, working, co-writing songs, for instance, has been re-looking at notions of gift economies, social enterprising, and different ways of sort of decommoditizing music. So I think I'll probably learn more than anything. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to jump the other way. The question for Kamala. You define your practice through urban geography as a lens, and you also make film. And I wonder if you can talk to us about the importance of moving image and how you use it to express and investigate the concerns that you talk about in terms of urban geography.
Yeah, I consider myself a small F filmmaker. My mom would be the capital F filmmaker. My mom's Loretta Todd. And she went to film school. She's a proper filmmaker, whose work I really admire and have learned a great deal from. She continues to innovate. She's the one going into VR. She's the one doing all this incredible work. Myself, I kind of resisted being a filmmaker because it just seemed too obvious to do what my mom does. But so for me, I see it more as a continuation of telling stories, obviously, but bringing those stories out in a really visible way. One of the privileges I've had is working in television and then working for the city of Vancouver. In both ways, I was able to gather or support people to tell their stories of this particular place, in a place where we do live with this narrative of this is what it is, this is the history, it's a young city with little history, and these are the people who kind of decide what the culture is. And to disrupt that narrative through video, and especially now, is even more important. It's even more the medium that speaks to so many people. So it's just it's another way to highlight and showcase the beauty of our cultures, the strength of our cultures, and the importance and necessity, actually, of our knowledge and teachings. Like Marianne said, it's actually what the world needs right now. And so I do everything I can through video to provide a place for people to share those perspectives. Every chance I get, for example, I often interview Larry Grant, Musqueam elder, and he always will make a very strong statement about we have always been here. And every chance I get, I make sure that's clear in my videos, that sense of continuity, from the community themselves, and how important it is for people to hear that. And the power of Lindsay's video of seeing that, of seeing the work that people are doing. And I don't know about you, but it sure got me enraged, and also wanting to support and get out there and stop this from happening. So it's a very powerful way to share those voices and to continue our traditions of oral history. I personally don't believe in playing with video, not saying like the experimental side and being an artist, that's amazing, but I don't like to go out and interview elders and then like mess around with it and do funky things with it. I like, I'm pretty kind of straightforward, but that's because of the material that I'm working with is just a little more straightforward that way. But I am hoping with this project to get more into being able to be more innovative and disrupt my own kind of straightforward narrative approach that I have. And so I'm learning from people like Althea about the other things that can be done with film, maybe from other traditions.
Thank you. I've got a question for Wendy next. Wendy, in your visual arts practice, you stage photographs. It's in a way that might resonate for a Vancouver audience particularly, or that they will be familiar with. And I'm interested in the role of contemporary materials in the images that you create. And I wonder if you could speak a little about the kind of objects and materials that feature in the tableau that you stage, if that's a way that if that's an accurate way of talking about it.
I think the work you're talking about is the Four Seasons with the dioramas. And those are works that I produced in 2006. So they're quite old. But they actually, what I've found is that they really resonate now for some reason. And I think last year, like 6 museums were showing them at the same time, and I was like, this is so crazy. That they almost feel a little bit like a separate entity to me. But I think what is happening is, and I'll get to what your question was, but I think what's happening is that work, when I made it, was based off of the strange experience that I had in graduate school at UCLA, and I was really missing my home. And I knew in a really messed up way I could go to the Natural History Museum and see crow things, and so that's what I did. And the way that museum was set up then is that you walk through this dinosaur exhibit with this big brontosaurus, and you walk underneath the brontosaurus, and then you get to the native galleries. So everything was set up to make people think that everything is extinct. And sure enough, there was a pair of crow moccasins. And because our tribe is so small, I knew that if only they had identified the owner of those moccasins, I was probably directly related or knew who they were. And then part of that experience also included walking around and seeing the dioramas that looked very much like Montana. And so what I wanted to do was create these 4 seasons in these dioramas. And I wore my traditional outfit, which was in my closet. And I think what I see now is that a lot of these museums realize that they don't have that indigenous perspective or that sort of critique of the institution. And so this sort of explosion of them in institutions now and exhibitions, I think, is because of that and what we're seeing. So yeah, I feel like I don't really quite make work like that so much, but it served like that purpose for me in that time. And I think more what I'm working towards is history and timelines and things like that. So seeing the potlatch was pretty amazing to see a whole sort of history and the politics and talk about land, and that really resonated with me and the materials and things that I'm using now to illustrate my own culture's history. So that was really valuable to witness that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Zigzagging here, so coming back, it's a question for Althea, and you introduced the idea in your initial presentation to us about, in this project, drawing on a particular kind of skill set that you've developed through working with different kinds of community and working with the moving image. And I wonder if, in this context, you see this as being a totally different kind of project, or if you kind of have any expectations or aspirations around working with the moving image that really comes from how you've worked with it previously.
Yes and no. I think that in some ways, like I mentioned earlier, as you said, that that there is a kind of like set of skills that over the years I have acquired because I have to in the kind of work that I do, and that has to do with facilitating certain kinds of dialogues and forms of collaboration, and trying to also really, and I guess, sort of coming to an understanding of the necessity of friendship and relations in working, and that is kind of being primary in terms of a way of being in a place. So yeah, I think that of course, one of the big things that's different about this is that I am not, I'm not the leader of the project, and I'm someone who, in many ways, I think that I'm kind of going to be a bit more in the background. I'm going to be facilitating stuff. I'm going to be working, but not more kind of observing and perhaps trying to find lines between things that could be connected later, because I think I'll have eyes on a number of the different projects. Sorry, what was the second part of your question? Oh. But I think I guess a big part of it is that in the work that I've done previously, which is again a similarity and a difference, is that the process of the kinds of activities and workshops and research and discussions and aspects of things that have to happen before a film gets made or beside the making of a film are things that are so important, and things that in the work that that I've done previously aren't shown or aren't the things that kind of go out. And so I see this as being similar, but even more so that the work that I can contribute towards will be grounded in the discussions that are happening, and will be a kind of a form of, like, I see that I'm able to serve the project in this way, and it started. Those conversations have started. We had them in the van. We're having them now. We had them earlier today, and this is as important and as much the stuff of the work and the importance of the work and the work that must be done as any kind of final film that goes out into the world.
Thank you. Over to Diane. One of the interesting kind of vectors that informs historical colonial mindset is privileging end-mindedness over embodiedness and embeddedness. And you work a lot with the body and strategies of inhabiting the body. And I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about the particular aspects of your practice through which you encourage the people with whom you work to think about embodiedness and to feel it.
I guess what I was saying earlier are about these stories that live in our bodies, that are buried in our bones, that are traveling through our blood, and being able to understand how and when to tap into those stories, how to listen to those stories, how to be your own internal witness, but also how to witness them in other people. And what I'm reminded of, and it may connect to the question about rhythm, is Nabadoo, your one of the dances that you did in the potlatch. And what I witnessed in your body was the backwards and forwards movement of this particular dance, which was a bee, and that Nabadoo's body was moving forwards and backwards at the same time, and that there was a rhythm and an internal rhythm within the body that was speaking a story that was way beyond just the activities that are happening in the body. There was a story that was emerging out of what seemed like very simple movement that was really intricate and complex. So I'm interested in that how do we witness that in each other? How do we then bring that out and deepen our understanding of our own rhythmic body, our own internal stories, and the stories that come through us. I talked, I think, this afternoon about our bodies being a portal for story. And history is a big part of that. The timelines that you showed were really incredible, just how we travel through time. Part of the reason for me for doing this work was that I've always been a terrible history student. I could never remember dates. And part of it was that I could never place myself because I'd have to learn European history. And I couldn't figure out, well, what does that mean for me? Like, I couldn't place myself and my own ancestors in that timeline. So yeah, I think it's about how we embody time, how we embody space, and the here and now, and the there and then. And I think it all exists in our bodies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Finally, I have a question for Marianne. So this is your first big moving image project or film project. But I wonder if you can speak about the relationship to the animation of light in your practice.
Jam, you're pretty good with your observations. Yeah, there's been kind of a trajectory, I guess, of engaging with light in my practice, and it kind of started off with this ceremonial observation of a performance amongst our people that used light, where a sunbeam would come through the crack in the roof, and then be followed you know, like the body would have to connect with that sunbeam and then follow it in its trajectory. And I was interested in that, and that's why I started to use light in a performance aspect in artworks. And I guess, so it is a natural process or step then into something like film, because of course it's very light engaged. So, but it is somewhat of an unknown for me too. I haven't made film before, so it's another risk, I guess, there. And it's interesting because, of course, the original relationship where the dialogue started to occur was between me and Althea. And I think of Althea as a filmmaker. I don't think of myself as a filmmaker. So in a way, Althea and I have formed this relationship where we will rely on each other, I suppose. And we don't know what the finished product is in the long run, but it's based on trust and the agreement that we will walk this process together.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open up questions to the floor. We do have microphones, so please raise your hand if you have a question, and wait for a mic to find you. And if you can indicate to whom your question is addressed, if it's a specific person or if it's a general question, that would be helpful. Thank you. Anyone? Anyone? Well, we do have a buffet at the back, and I would like to invite everyone to gather at the back and mingle and ask any questions that you might have. Siku?
I have a question for Siku.
Oh, Siku. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh my goodness.
So this is the last question, I suppose. I'm thinking about the way that you were speaking about your families in the presentation this afternoon, and its relationship to your writing work, which, if I understand correctly, has a relationship with. I'm just wondering about your relationship to history and fiction, if you can say something about that.
I shared a little bit about my Taino ancestry this afternoon with the group, and one of the things I talked about is that where my mother's family, where we trace our line, is in Haiti, which was originally called Quisqueya, which is where Columbus and his ships first arrived when they reached the Western world. And so they encountered my ancestors, and they wrote the history. They wrote this fiction that we, like the historians, wrote this fiction that the Taino people, through genocide and slavery and sickness, had become extinct. And that's what people grow up reading about in history books. And so when it's one-sided recording of things with an agenda to create something imaginary, such as an empty land, a world to be conquered and exploited and turned into wealth, that's a very particular story, that's a very particular fiction that Indigenous lived experience, Indigenous presence, our continued presence undermines that fiction and is rewriting a story that is an ongoing story. And that's how I understand being as many truths. And maybe that's all I'll say about that. Thank you.
Anyone thought of any questions in the audience they'd like to ask? If not, please do join us to kind of mingle at the back to help with the rest of the buffet. I'd like to say another big thank you to all of our participating artists. I'd like to say thanks again to the SFU Institute for the Humanities and SFU Galleries, and to the Belkin Gallery for all their support with events today and this event this evening. Thanks one and all, and please look out for the exhibition that will be one of the outcomes of the Mirrored in Stone project that will take place at Belkin from January to April next year. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.